Picture this. It's roughly 45,000 years ago, and you are standing at the edge of camp as the light dies. You are waiting. The others tell you to sit, to eat, to stop watching the tree line. You don't. Because someone went out this morning, and that someone has not come back. And something is happening inside your body that you have no framework to explain. Your chest is tight. Your stomach is wrong. You cannot make yourself look away from the horizon. You don't know the word worry. You don't know the word love. You barely have language at all. But you have this specific, physical, undeniable pull toward one person in a world of many. And then a shape appears at the ridge, their shape, the way they walk. You'd know it anywhere, and everything in your body, the tightness, the wrongness, the dread, releases all at once into something warm and overwhelming and completely beyond your ability to name. That feeling. That exact feeling. Here is what science is only now starting to prove. It wasn't new, even then. The machinery running underneath that moment was already millions of years old. Older than language, older than humanity, older than almost anything you'd think of as human. You didn't invent it. Neither did they. When did an ancient human first feel something that looked exactly like love? Not the word, the feeling. That's the question. Let's go find the answer. Let's get one thing out of the way immediately. The question, when did love begin, is the wrong question. Or rather, it's a question that hides a much deeper one underneath it. Because to ask when love began, you first have to ask what love actually is. And that is where things get strange. We treat love as the most natural thing in the world, as something obvious, self-evident, a given. But love is not simple. Love is a machine, a biological machine, built out of chemistry, wired into the oldest parts of your brain, running on processes that evolved for reasons that have almost nothing to do with poetry. And once you understand what that machine is made of, the real question reveals itself. Not, when did humans start feeling love? But, when did evolution first build the machinery that love runs on? And why? Because here is the thing nobody tells you. Evolution does not build things because they are beautiful. It does not build feelings because they are meaningful. It builds them because they work. Because the ancient humans who felt them survived and reproduced and passed that machinery down. Which means that somewhere in the deep past, love was not a luxury. It was a survival strategy. And it was so effective that you are still running it today. So let's open up the machine and look inside. When neuroscientists study what is physically happening in the brain of a person in love, three chemicals keep showing up. The first is oxytocin. You may have heard it called the love hormone or the cuddle chemical. Those names are cute, and they undersell it badly. Oxytocin is one of the most powerful social bonding molecules in the entire animal kingdom. It floods the brain during childbirth, during breastfeeding, during physical touch, during sex, during any moment of deep social closeness. And what it does is simple and profound. It makes one specific individual feel important to you. It tags a person as mine, as family, as worth protecting. The second chemical is vasopressin. Vasopressin is oxytocin's partner, closely related and especially involved in long-term bonding, protectiveness, and loyalty. If oxytocin is the spark of connection, vasopressin is the part that makes it last. And the third is dopamine. Dopamine is the reward chemical, the molecule of craving, motivation, and wanting. It is what makes love feel less like a gentle preference and more like a need. It's why early love can feel almost like an addiction. Because at the chemical level, it kind of is. The same reward circuitry that lights up for food, for water, for the things you need to survive, lights up for the person you've bonded to. Your brain, quite literally, files them under survival. Now here is where it gets remarkable. This three-chemical system, oxytocin, vasopressin, dopamine, is ancient. It did not evolve for romance. It evolved, originally, for something much more basic and much more urgent. The bond between a mother and her child. That was the first love. The original blueprint. A mammal mother who felt nothing for her offspring would not protect them, would not feed them, would not keep them alive. Her genes would end. So evolution built a chemical leash, a powerful, compulsive, almost unbreakable bond between parent and infant. And then, much later, in certain species, evolution did something clever. It took that existing machinery, the mother-infant bonding system, and it repurposed it. It pointed it at a partner. The same chemicals that made a mother unable to abandon her baby were redeployed to make two adults unable to abandon each other. Love between partners, in other words, is built on borrowed parts. It is parental love, rewired. And that rewiring is the key to the entire story. Because it doesn't happen in most mammals. In fact, it's rare. Which raises the obvious question: when did it happen in us? Before we get to ancient humans, we have to make a detour. Because to understand human love, you need to meet a small, unremarkable-looking rodent that lives on the grasslands of North America, the prairie vole. The prairie vole looks like nothing special, a mouse with a stubby tail, but the prairie vole does something that almost no other mammal does. It falls in love, or at least, it does the closest thing to it that an animal can do. When a prairie vole finds a mate, the two of them form a pair bond that lasts for life. They share a nest. They raise their young together. They groom each other. When separated, they show signs of distress. When one dies, the survivor often never pairs again. Scientists like Sue Carter and Larry Young spent decades studying these animals. And what they discovered cracked the chemistry of love wide open. The prairie vole's lifelong bonding runs on exactly the chemicals we just discussed: oxytocin, vasopressin, dopamine, the very same system. And here is the experiment that proves it. There is a close cousin of the prairie vole called the montane vole. The montane vole looks almost identical, but the montane vole does not pair bond. It mates and moves on. No lasting attachment, no partner, nothing. The difference between the faithful vole and the unfaithful one comes down to receptors. The prairie vole's brain has receptors for vasopressin and oxytocin in the reward centers. The montane vole has far fewer. And when scientists altered the receptors, when they gave a non-bonding vole the prairie vole's receptor pattern, the non-bonding vole started bonding. Let that sink in. They changed how an animal loved by changing a handful of receptors in its brain. Love, at its mechanical core, turned out to be that tangible, that physical, that ancient. But, and this is the critical but, there is a line. The prairie vole bonds. Genuinely, durably, measurably. But the prairie vole almost certainly does not lie awake at night thinking about its partner. It does not grieve in poetry. It does not build meaning around the bond. It does not anticipate a future or mourn a past. It has the machinery of love. What it does not have is the layer that humans wrapped around that machinery. The memory, the narrative, the awareness. And somewhere in our ancestry, ancient humans took that ancient bonding chemistry, and they added something to it. They added a mind that could hold the bond, remember it, dread its loss, and feel it as meaning. The question is, when? Here is the honest problem. Feelings don't fossilize. You cannot dig up love. You cannot carbon date a feeling. So how could we ever know what an ancient human felt 45,000 years ago? The answer is that we look for the things love makes people do. Because love is not just a feeling, it is a behavior. And behavior leaves marks. It leaves marks on bone. Consider a skeleton known as Shanidar 1, a Neanderthal man who lived around 45,000 years ago in what is now northern Iraq. When archaeologist Eric Trinkhaus examined his remains, he found a body that had been catastrophically broken, a withered, likely useless arm, blindness in one eye from a crushing blow to the skull, damage to the legs severe enough to leave him limping in pain. By every law of survival in a brutal world, this man should have died young. He did not. His injuries had healed. Healed means time. Healed means years of living with disabilities that made him nearly helpless, which means that for years, other members of his group fed him, sheltered him, protected him, carried part of his weight through a world that did not forgive weakness. They kept alive a man who could offer them very little in return. There is no survival of the fittest explanation for that. There is only one explanation that fits. They cared about him. And Shanidar is not alone. There is a skeleton called Romito II, a young man with a form of dwarfism that would have made him unable to participate in hunting or hard labor. He lived to adulthood anyway, cared for, included. There is the old man of La Chapelle, a Neanderthal so riddled with arthritis and missing so many teeth that someone almost certainly had to help him eat. He survived for years in that state. Across the archaeological record, again and again, we find the same impossible thing. Ancient humans keeping alive the people who, by cold logic, should have been left behind. That is the fingerprint of love, not the word, not the poetry, the behavior, the choice, made over and over across years, to spend your own survival on someone else's. And it gets more tender still, because ancient humans did not only care for the living, they cared for the dead. We have found graves, deliberate graves, going back tens of thousands of years. Bodies arranged with care, placed in sleeping positions, sometimes covered in red ochre, sometimes buried with tools, with ornaments, with flowers. You do not bury a body with ceremony unless that body mattered to you. You do not grieve what you did not love. The grave is not just a place to put the dead, it is proof that someone could not bear to simply walk away. So why did this happen in humans so powerfully? Why did we, of all animals, develop love this deep, this durable, this central to who we are? The answer may lie in the most helpless creature on earth, the human baby. A human infant is born absurdly, dangerously underdeveloped. A baby horse can stand and walk within hours of birth. A baby human cannot hold up its own head for months. It cannot walk for a year. It cannot feed itself, protect itself, or survive on its own for years. No other animal has a childhood this long, this fragile, this demanding. And that helplessness changed everything, because a baby that needy could not be raised by one exhausted parent alone. It required a mother bonded fiercely to her child. It required, in many cases, a father who stayed. It required a whole web of bonded adults, grandmothers, siblings, the wider group, all invested in keeping one fragile child alive. The human infant, in other words, demanded love at scale. It made the chemical bonding machinery not just useful, but essential. The groups whose members bonded deeply, who stayed, who protected, who cared, kept their children alive. The groups who didn't. And so, generation after generation, evolution selected for the capacity to love hard and love long. Psychologist John Bowlby gave this a name, attachment. He showed that human infants are born with a powerful built-in drive to bond with a caregiver. It is not learned, it is not optional, it is wired in from birth. A baby separated from its caregiver does not just feel inconvenienced. It experiences something that looks, neurologically, like terror. Because for almost all of human history, separation from your caregiver meant death. That same attachment system, the one that binds an infant to its mother, is the system that, later in life, binds you to a partner, to a friend, to the people you cannot imagine living without. The fear you feel at the thought of losing someone you love is not weakness. It is a 200,000-year-old survival alarm, doing exactly what it was built to do. Now, let's be honest about where this leaves us, because everything we've covered points to a conclusion that some people find difficult. Love is chemistry. Love is ancient mammalian machinery, repurposed parental bonding, oxytocin and vasopressin and dopamine, attachment circuitry built by the relentless logic of survival. The feeling you thought was uniquely yours, uniquely human, uniquely meaningful, is a biological system millions of years in the making, shared in its core with a rodent on the prairie. And for some people, that's where the warmth drains out. If love is just chemicals, they think, then maybe it isn't real, maybe it's an illusion, maybe it's a trick, but stay with this, because that conclusion is exactly backwards. The fact that love is ancient does not make it small. It makes it one of the most enduring forces life has ever produced. Think about what it took to build this. Millions of years of evolution, countless generations, an unbroken chain of ancestors who felt this exact pull and acted on it. Every single one of your ancestors, everyone, without exception, was loved enough or loved hard enough to survive and pass life forward. You are the end point of an unbroken line of love that stretches back further than the species itself. That is not less romantic than the poet's version. It is more. And here is the part the cynics miss entirely. Yes, love is chemistry, but so is everything you've ever felt. Joy is chemistry. Grief is chemistry. Wonder is chemistry. The fact that a feeling runs on molecules has never once made it less true. When that ancient human stood at the edge of camp 45,000 years ago, watching the tree line, chest tight, unable to look away, the chemicals running through their body were real. And so was the feeling. The two were never in conflict. They never have been. So, when did ancient humans first feel something that looked exactly like love? The honest answer is that there was no single moment, no first kiss in the dark, no origin point we can mark on a timeline. Because love did not arrive all at once. It assembled, slowly, across millions of years, layer by layer. First the chemistry, inherited from creatures that came long before us. Then the bonding, refined in the relationship between mother and child. Then the rewiring, that pointed parental devotion toward a partner. Then the long human childhood, that made deep bonding not optional but essential. And finally, the mind, the human mind, that took all of that ancient machinery and wrapped it in memory and meaning and awareness. That could hold the bond across time. That could remember a face, anticipate a loss, grieve an absence. That could feel the bond not just as a pull, but as a story. Your story, with one specific person at the center of it. That was the moment love became what we know. Not when the chemicals appeared, but when a creature appeared that could know it was feeling them. And that creature was us. Somewhere in the deep past, long before language could name it, long before art could paint it, long before a single love song was ever sung, an ancient human felt the tightening and the loosening, felt the pull toward one person in a world of many, felt the unbearable wrongness of their absence and the flood of relief at their return. And though they had no word for it, they knew. The way you know. The healed bones tell us they cared for each other. The careful graves tell us they grieved. The long childhoods tell us they had to love or perish. And the chemistry running quietly in your own body right now tells us the machinery has never stopped. It is the same machinery, the same pull, the same warmth, the same ancient, essential, hard-won thing. So the next time you feel it, the tightening when someone you love is late, the loosening when they walk through the door, understand what you are holding. You are holding something older than your species, something tested by every ancestor who ever lived, something that survived ice ages and famines and 300,000 years of darkness because it was too important to lose. The ancient human at the edge of camp felt it. You feel it now, and across 45,000 years, across everything that separates their world from yours, it is, unmistakably, the same feeling. It always was. It always will be.